I'm Dr. Gloria Latimore-Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3o Art of Life show. The title of this show is Ready or Not. Probably needs several question marks after the ready or not question. And it's a show about community preparedness. And I want to open up before I introduce my guests by giving you a definition of community that is different from the one that you will find in the social science dictionary. The social science dictionary defines a community as a group of related neighborhoods. In my view, a community is a group of people who share values, and it doesn't really matter a lot where they are geographically located. If they are people who share values, they are a community, and space and time does not have the weight that it has when you use it as just because you live next door to somebody, you live in their community. You may live next door to people with whom you have no relationship, and to whom you don't even with whom you don't even interact. So we're talking about asking about community preparedness from the standpoint of people who share the value that it is important that we continue to be. It's that's just for starters. We just think we should be, and we just think we should stay being. And so I want to introduce the two guests I've asked to engage in this dialogue. First of all, Gimbu Kali, who is sometimes known as Gerald Vernon, and he hasn't used that for a very long time. So if I sometimes slip, don't mind. I understand. You understand. Professor of Inner City Studies Education at Northeastern Illinois University. No, retired. He used to be a professor there, and of course my dear friend Fred Carter from the Black Oak Center. And I've invited them here because, what you see is what you get, and they practice what they preach. I'm not interested in having armchair philosophers talk to us about community preparedness. I think I'll start with Gimbu, because years ago I went with him on an outdoor exercise where he was teaching us how to maintain ourselves in case we found ourselves in a situation where we were not within the warmth and comfort of our own homes, as people have found themselves suddenly on the East Coast. So it could happen, it has happened, it did happen. And let's talk about the work that you've done down through the years, taking groups of people out of their comfort zone and into an area where they can learn how to preserve themselves in the case of crisis and chaos.
Right. Well, thanks for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to talk here. The group I work with is called the Outdoor Leadership Skills Project, or the Black Survival Network. This is our 35th year of doing this. We started this in June of 1977. And we've been on a pretty steady roll since then. What we do is teach classes in basic wilderness survival training, and we have it set up on a variety of levels of training. So a person who's starting off at level 1 is basically set up for someone who's never spent a night in the woods, who knows nothing about nothing as far as outdoor survival, and have a program to train that person all the way up to an instructor level where they can continue to go out and do what we've been doing. The classes that we cover are how to organize and set up a campsite, how to make a fire, how to identify, locate, and treat water to make it drinkable, plant identification, how to identify plants for use of food or medicine or poison plants to avoid, map reading, compass reading, land navigation, obstacle course, basic self-defense is what we cover in our basic course. Then we have an advanced level 1, which covers the same courses as level 1, but at a higher level. Moving from one level up is always a voluntary process, because if you don't know what you're doing, you're the one that's going to pay for it. So that's why it's always voluntary. When a person feels like they're ready, they can try for level 2. Level 2 is a practical test of level 1 skills. And we never send people to do any of this by themselves. It's always in groups of 2 or more. But whereas level 1, you learn how to purify dirty water. Level 2, you purify some dirty water and then you drink it, if it's pure. Level 1, you learn how to identify edible plants. Level 2, one of your meals has to be plants that you pick. Level 1, you learn how to read a map and compass. Level 2, you blindfold, you take your mile or 2 away, give you a map and compass, we see when you get back. So we have a cliche that says a front lasts 10 minutes out in the woods, because this is not something you can talk your way through or out of. Either you know it or you don't, and if you don't know it, you're going to pay for it. When a person feels like they're ready, they can try out for level 3, which is our stress test. This is where a person has to go out to the woods somewhere between 24 to 48 hours, but all they can take with them is a knife, a compass, 10 matches, and the clothes on their back. They got to get their own food, water, and shelter from the natural environment. And then level 4 is our instructor level test. For level 4, that person would have to organize and instruct a level 1 class. They would be responsible for holding the orientation, doing the advertisement, teaching all the classes. They're responsible for logistics, security, first aid, the whole 9 yards. So at the end of level 4, they know what we know, and essentially they can go out and duplicate what it is that we've been doing. And so our whole idea is to try and spread this knowledge as much as possible. It does us no good if we're the only ones who know it. So our whole idea is to try and spread this, as far throughout the community as possible, because we realize that these are vital skills, that all life-giving and life-sustaining necessities come into the black community from outside. That somebody else controls the water, someone else controls the food, someone else controls the light and gas and electricity and so forth and so on. And the question we raised was, well, what happens if they decide to cut that stuff off one day? I can remember, even though I was a child back in '68 when Dr. King was killed and the riots that ensued after that, and there were certain areas on the south side and the west side where they cut the water off and the electricity off for 2 and 3 days as a way of pacifying people and putting people back in line. And so we came to understand that if you don't have those kind of basic skills, and a lot of these are skills that our grandparents, grew up with because they were raised in a rural environment that we've completely lost being raised in the city environment. And so we thought it was prudent that we develop a program to teach these kind of skills to people who are living in the city, so that they would have some life-saving skills that they could depend on. Probably the best testimony we ever got for this. We do this in Chicago. At the time, back in the early 2000s, we were doing this in Chicago. Our brother Hannibal Afrique, who was our founder, had moved to Port Gibson, Mississippi. So we were doing this in Mississippi, and then we were also doing this over on in Virginia, over on the East Coast. In the spring of 2005, we had a family from New Orleans to come and participate in our Mississippi encampment. And at the end of September, we got a really, really touching letter from this family thanking us and saying that what we taught them actually helped to save their lives. And they described the ordeal that they went through, how they said it took 15 minutes for the house to fill up with water from the time it came through the threshold to the time they had to punch a hole through the ceiling and climb up on the roof. It took 15 minutes for the house to fill up with water. How the parents had to swim from the attic down to the first floor to get cans of food and bottles of water and so forth. The wife's mother was living with them, who was elderly and having health issues, and it's 98 degrees outside, and just the whole ordeal. And ironically, how it was the children who remembered what they were supposed to do first, while the parents were arguing back and forth with each other. It was the children who remembered, hey, mommy, in survival camp, they said we're supposed to do this, that, and the other. So that's probably the best testimony that what we have works, because this actually helped to save this family's life. So something that we're very proud of, but I also want to say that this is the kind of thing that we need some assistance with, because we were in our 20s when we started this, and we're in our 50s and 60s now. We're getting a tad old to keep doing this. So we need some 20-year-olds and some 30-year-olds to come along behind and help keep this thing going. We need to institutionalize this. Black community got a ton of organizations, but very few institutions. And one of the biggest differences between the two is that institutions are designed to outlive their founders from the get-go. So that's what we need. That's what we would like to do with this, is to institutionalize this activity, so this is continuing on long after we're gone.
Well, you brought a lot of things to mind, but I don't want to do a one-on-one, but I'm going to try to park some of these questions I have for you and observations, because when you talk about the things that our people knew, I'm the daughter of a farmer. Okay. I was born in the South, not as far south as my father farmed. But the whole point is that during the summers was the only time I spent out in the country on the farm, and nobody required me to do much because they didn't think I knew, and they didn't hold me responsible for anything. So I pretty much just got to enjoy myself and be in whatever I wanted to be in and not do some of the things, but I observed them all being done. Here is a man, Fred Carter, who I don't know where you were before you became a farmer, but I suspect that it was probably somewhere over in corporate America. And so there's a distinct difference from being in urban centers, and working for the man, as opposed to being in a rural area doing for self. So I want you to tell me something about that journey and why you decided to make it.
Well, you were correct. I was at one time, I was what they call a Tier 1 with General Motors. We ran one of the 10th largest distribution center for General Motors. And I was steeped in that world. We call it the carbon world. So I was steeped in the carbon world. Then 9/11 happened. So when the planes hit the Twin Towers, one of the prime vendors that I had filed bankruptcy. And boy, that had a very negative impact on our company. And so 3 years later, we closed down, sold the company off. I didn't know what to do with myself. I had lived in this world. Here I am. I got to recreate myself. So I'm gonna go on and recreate myself because I felt I was always good at recreating myself. You fall down, you get up, you recreate yourself. I said to myself, wow, what do I want to do? At that time, I didn't have to go out and do anything specifically because of, I didn't have to do it. So I said, well, I put on the old hippie hat. So I want to learn about solar. So I'm going to take a solar class. I took a solar class, went to Custer, Wisconsin, took a solar class on solar hot water. And the instructor, I was the only black person in the class. Nobody would speak to me but the instructor. But I had a great instructor. This guy turned me on to, I bought almost every book, and I spent over $500 on books. And one book that was most transformative to me was by a guy named Richard Heinberg called The Party Is Over.
The Party Is Over.
The Party Is Over. I don't know if you read it.
It's time to call it a day. Remember
that
song?
Party Is Over, and he had a picture of a gasoline funnel and talking about peak oil and energy. I have never thought that energy had anything to do with my life. It's like one of those things you have in the background. You never think about it, but it's. So I was recreating myself. I said, how can I recreate myself? And so I was talking about going back into that business. But energy impacts everything I do. And one of the exercises in there, it was so disturbing. I think I was depressed for like 6 months after reading it. Because it was one of those kind of things you didn't want to know about, but once you know about it, it kind of disrupts your paradigm. Mm-hmm. And I had never included this in my planning and business or anything in life. And then he was talking about the end of industrialized life, end of Western life.
The end of oil.
The end of oil, end of cheap oil. And so one of the exercises in the book, he said, go to the lake somewhere and just imagine. I went on the lakefront in Chicago over there by the planetarium. Just imagine 10% less energy. I mean, it blew me away. I saw the lights. What would that be like? 10% people can't go up the elevator, your car's not moving around. And then what I did, I checked what he was saying. It was accurate. So that started a whole new journey of sustainability for me. At the time, they didn't call it sustainability. I started taking classes. I accidentally went to a conference in Yellow Springs, Ohio, where this guy was at. I met him. And they were a group of Europeans who was angry, upset. And there was only 2 of us in the room. They forgot we was in the room. And they made the statement that we got this energy problem. That's why we're in Iraq, and the government need to tell the truth. Our children are not going to have the privilege and power that we took for granted. These are white people. We don't. Well, so why they not? Well, we had power because we had cheap energy. We controlled the planet because we was controlling this fuel that drove everything. And we started hanging with them, learning more, until one day they was talking about the impact this was going to have on communities. And that our community are going to be one of the communities that nothing, like you said, the switch was cut off in the 60s, that the switch would be cut off in our community. And energy, food, because of this contraction of resources. And we're starting to see it now. I mean, that was enough for me. I said, it's time. Me and my wife said, it's time for us to go home. They didn't know. They had forgot we was in the room. They had already had the strategy about our community not being able to get resources because we don't really control it. It's not going to be enough of it.
Your point.
This point, cut the switch off. I personally don't know anyone that has any control over any of those items. They're not in my family.
Utilities.
Yeah. Utilities, food, energy, finance, none of it. Not control. Not making the decision whether a resource flows in a direction or not flow in a direction. So it was pretty disturbing for me, and we said, what the heck are we going to do? And then my son woke up one morning and said, Dad, you messed my life up. That's really got me there. It didn't snow. I mean, it was a winter. It was one of those Christmas that it didn't snow, and he was having a terrible hard time. And he said, it's climate change, it's this and that. And you guys, he said, what are y'all going to do about it? He was crying because it wasn't going to be, and his birthday is in December.
Bright kid.
So, yeah, he was crying and said, what are you going to do about it? We looked at each other, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to do anything about that? And so we started a journey. We're still on this journey. It's called, and we named the journey Black Oak Center for Sustainable Renewable Living, preparing our community for a post-carbon world. What they were talking about was a world after peak oil, peak resources.
You need to say something about peak oil. Don't just presume that vocabulary is out there.
So peak oil is a term used to describe when there's a resource reach halfway point, or half of what it is.
This is as much of this as it's
like
going to be.
Looking at a glass.
Right.
You know, halfway point is half full, half empty, however you want to interpret it. And no matter how many straws you put into that cup,
it's not going to
you're not going to get
increase.
Anymore. No matter, like now we got China in the straw, we got India in the straw, and we're coming up with alternatives like shale gas, fracking and all that, which is not going to replace this black gold. I say they're burning our ancestors. I say that's the problem. So we looked at peak oil and the impact energy has on life. If you ever notice, every time energy prices increase, we have a recession. It's a crash. And energy is tied to economics. If there's no cheap energy, there's no exponential growth. So the whole industrial system is based on exponential growth, constant growing. And so I was in a business that was always based on how many people can get these vehicles, constant growing. That's the business model. If a business don't grow, it dies. If a system doesn't grow, it based on the way we design it, it dies. And I was seeing the demise and the dying of a system. I mean, you know, in the past, I remember back in the 60s, we always thought something political was going to happen.
Like a revolution.
A revolution was going to happen. And I remember in '74, we was preparing for collapse, you know, something like that. Everybody running around getting diamonds and water and getting rocks going out. You know, I was with a group in
2000, the same Y2K.
Right. Y2K, these were all abstract collapse. But when mother tell you, I ain't got no more, you got to give up sucking off that breast because I don't have any more milk. I don't have enough milk. That's a different scenario. That's not political. That's a physical constraint. And no matter what we say about all the technology gonna solve it, it ain't happened yet. You know, and it's not going to happen because even the technology depends on that oil.
Well, you know, there's a program that's been playing, a documentary called Doomsday Preppers. It's been on National Geographic Channel.
Right.
And it's amazing because you see the extent to which some communities, and again, groups of people who share values, are going to assure that they will have some odds stacked in their favor, you know.
Yes.
They presume that you may not be able to go up to the convenience store and get what you're gonna eat today. You know, we have a tendency, I think, to do things in a way that, as Kiara Cheatwood says, the whole damn vibe is convenience. You know, you do things when it suits you or when you have time. You don't think ahead. You don't plan ahead. You actually think you have enough discretionary funds to be on the boat somewhere, be in some casino somewhere, when actually you need to be somewhere maybe buying some more supplies. You know,
Right.
you may need to have maybe more than, say, a 6-pack of toilet tissue or paper towels, you know, just some kind of practical things. And so the discipline and the practical attitude that you just need, you know, you just need to have that. If nothing ever changes and you know, if the world continues to turn on its axis and no more icebergs, no more ice caps dissolve into the ocean, and no more hurricanes or tropical storms, tsunamis, you know, gobble up any more land and houses and people. If nothing ever happens, it is unwise, and can we say foolhardy, for us to act as though we don't see that these things happen in the world, and we don't see the people suffering. We saw Katrina. You know, that's indelible in our minds. We saw Katrina. We saw that nobody came to rescue those people. And we saw that they suffered and died and disappeared. They died and they disappeared. We saw that. So what does it take for us to say that maybe we need to be functioning like a community? The beautiful thing about Sandy that I saw was that this community called Red Hook, which is right near Brooklyn, or maybe a part of it, main thing is it has a public housing project in it. Those are black people in a low-lying area. They said they knew nobody was coming to them, so they just sprung into action. They started to help each other. They created a community kitchen. Now, that just makes all the sense in the world. Why would you be in your house trying to cook your little last stuff you got and not knowing when a truck can get in here and refill the supplies that have disappeared out of the store? Why would you be trying to hoard your little stuff to yourself when if everybody brought something and threw it in the pot, you could feed everybody? You know, so just to get the group mentality working, you know, take that individual nuclear family out of the out of the equation and stop thinking of yourself as people who live under a single roof, but think of yourself as a human being in relationship to other human beings, and they want to live as much as you do, and so you need to be thinking ahead. But what is the difficulty, Gimbu, of getting people to know that if they are not prepared to take care of themselves, that they will be a burden on those who do prepare. Because that's the situation you'll find. You'll have some people making all these preparations, some people making none, and then you have a great deal more suffering.
Well, to me, it's kind of like the little red hen. If you remember that nursery rhyme.
Okay.
You know, who will help me make the cake? You know, not I said the bird. Nobody wants to do no work,
right,
but everybody wants to reap the benefits. Well,
right.
I'm sorry, but the way this works, if you don't work and you don't prepare ahead of time, then you don't get the benefits.
Okay.
Squirrels
don't share their nuts.
In other words, I remember I was telling the guy one time about our survival training program, and his response was, "Oh, well, if that's the case, I don't have to do nothing. If something goes down, I just come see you." And I told him, "You'll be the first person I shoot too." All right, because the notion that I'm going to spend my time, my money, my energy going out and making these preparations, I'm going to sacrifice on the party. I'm going to sacrifice on the vacation. I'm going to sacrifice on some of the other things that I want to do too. But I understand the importance of this and the importance of thinking ahead. And so I'm going to take some of my resources and dedicate it to those things that are going to allow me and my family to survive. And when I talk this to other people, oh man, he come with that old black stuff again. He come with that old crap again. Okay, well, when the stuff goes down, you don't want to hear from me now. I don't want to hear from you then. I mean, and it's difficult to get people to understand that, but you know, unfortunately, in the black community, there seems to be a very severe attitude of unaccountability, and that we don't actually have to account for the things that we say and do. But in a situation like that, if you ain't made preparations ahead of time, you in trouble.
Well, I think that you're right, but then of course you know that if you know that you're over here, and you know that you have friends and family members that are over there, and you know their lifestyle, and you know perfectly well that they don't have nothing, because you know that they go through life that way. You're not gonna be able to be comfortable, thinking that somebody somewhere needs something that you have, and that you're unable to share it because
in a long emergency, which is short term, that tactic is sustainable.
Right.
Long term, it's not. So we're in this long emergency. It's not like disaster happening instantly. A lot of times, it's happening all the time.
It's hardly visible to the untrained eye. You see prices go up in the store. You see vegetables change. Like I do a lot of juicing. So what is going on with the beets? The beets just turned into almost marbles because they couldn't get water. We weren't having rain. We were just having a lot of sun and not a lot of water. And so you begin to see a change in the foods that you eat.
Okay.
You begin to see a change in the prices of things. You begin to see a change in the availability of things. There are always these processed things. They're there in abundance because, they're making stuff out of whatever. Styrofoam, ain't no telling what's in some of the food supply. So all of that stuff, all that fast food, all that stuff at the franchise, is omnipresent. It's, they just rolling off the conveyor belt as fast as you can order it.
So that's the mind that we have. The guy that wrote this book I was sharing with you, he said, "Fred, we understand that your people plate is full." It was so disturbing. Our plates are so full with day-to-day problems.
Absolutely.
That we don't notice things anymore. So our awareness dampens down to the moment. And because we have insufficient resources.
Everything. Insufficient everything.
The people we were talking about initially they had resources to where they could sit around a lot of times and have conversations about 5 years down the way,
Right.
10 years.
Or like the doomsday preppies, you know, they buying containers, these storage containers,
But see,
and filling them up with stuff, and buying ammunition, and even things to make ammunition,
Right.
you know, and
But we're so conditioned and so invested in the belief that this government is and this system, even though the reality is so loud, it's going to take care of us. You know, we had a disaster training in Pembroke. It was a collaboration with FEMA, Homeland Security, it was community resilience, disaster preparedness. And the township, everybody, and you were there. And it was, we went around, everybody was saying, we got it together, we got it together. We know what to do. We've had a plan. Plan was 20 years ago, and we didn't even have sirens out there for warning. 10 days after, we couldn't get enough local people enrolled into class. Most of the people came from Chicago. But 10 days after the completion of that class, we had a deadly tornado, all right? And we were so ill prepared. The location, the shelter that we were supposed to go to, we couldn't even find a guy that had the keys to open the door. And the friends of mine who were saying they didn't have that problem, it's not a problem. When the storm hit, they were praying in the room, and no one was ready for this. Even though people assume that, people are always saying that our community is ready for anything. We still labor under that assumption. Well, we've survived slavery. We survived this, we survived that, but Katrina let us know we weren't.
we didn't all survive. The thing is, yes, some
survived.
people survive everything,
Right.
but survive at what
but
state?
we didn't all survive.
See, to me, it ain't simply about survival. A cockroach is the only guaranteed survivor of a nuclear holocaust. So he'll survive, but he'll survive at the level of a cockroach. So it ain't always a question of survival, but at what level of survival you're at.
Right.
You know, if the best you can do is live at the level of a cockroach, I'm not sure if that's worthy of
Survival.
You know, I think, I think, you know, even in our depressed economic condition, if we are serious, we'll still find a way to do stuff. Right. So you can take the poorest guy on the block, claim he ain't got no parts and no money, but let him know come Saturday night it's gonna be a party over here. It's gonna be 3 women, every 1 man. It's gonna be free wine, free booze, free weed, the whole 9 yards. He gonna find a way to get there.
He gonna find that
Broke as he is, he gonna find a way to get there because it's important. So people will spend money on what they think is important. I don't care how rich they are or how poor they are. They will still spend money on what they think is important. That's why you find so many poor people standing in the line trying to get a lottery ticket. You know, that's why you find so many poor people who engage in certain types of, when it comes to gambling. You have a lot of, I mean, I went out to a concert at the Horseshoe Casino last week and had people up in there look like, you know, they was like 3 checks away from welfare stuff. I mean, you know, so my point is that if all I can do is to afford $2 a week for some emergency supplies, well, Jules, a gallon of water is like $1, so I can get two gallons of water a week. All right, which means at the end of a year, I got what
104 gallons of water. You can drink water. Wow.
You know,
you can even flush your toilet.
Right. And not only that, but in addition to have those basic things that I'm going to need as far as drinking and cleaning and cooking, because you need water for 3 different sources, for 3 different reasons: drinking, cooking, and cleaning,
and flushing the toilet.
Right. But in addition to those, if I have enough, and if it appears as though this is a short term, when I say a short term emergency, that means 3 weeks from now things will be back to normal, then I can also use those additional supplies as a form of currency or as a form of barter.
Right, right.
I know one person that lives out in Pembroke. I'll leave him nameless and stuff like that. But him and his wife went out and bought 100 pounds of sugar. They ain't used white sugar in 25 years, but they understand other people do. So they went out and bought 100 pounds of sugar to just put up. And this is something that they can use as a form of currency. When money becomes worthless, then people go back to barter. And so the question then becomes, what do you have that other people want? And that then becomes a form of currency. It becomes a bargaining chip for you to be able to trade this for that.
That's a great
So
point.
how would you determine if a person, a family, a group, a community was ready? How would the level of readiness, if you had to make a list, you would go in there and you would be looking for?
I would be looking for food, number one, water, the medical needs of the immediate people involved. Do we have someone who's a diabetic? Do we have someone who's on thyroid medication? I mean, those kinds of things. So,
do you have first aid in case somebody falls and cuts themselves or something?
Yes, I want to look at both. I want to look at both prescription medicines as well as general first aid supplies.
So, do you have more than just a prescription for this month?
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Do you have some source of heat? I recommend people getting kerosene heaters, kerosene stoves, and kerosene lanterns because you're going to need all three. And you're talking about one source of fuel for all three items, and we're talking about a source of fuel that lasts untreated 100 years or longer. So whereas gasoline goes bad within a year or two.
And evaporates as well.
Right. So just looking at those things, and then it also becomes a question of how do you protect what it is that you have. So then it becomes a question of the need for both guns and ammunition and the training to effectively use those. This whole notion I could shoot straight if I had to is one of the biggest lies on planet Earth. Your skill goes down under stress. It don't go up. So I don't care. You're only going to be half as good in a real gunfight as you are on your best day at the range, because you got that adrenaline dump and your heart is beating fast and your hands are sweating. You're going through all the normal human signs of what people go through when they're in a state of fear and when they're in a state of trauma and when they go into that fight or flight mode. And so if you aren't prepared to deal with those things, I heard a situation on the East Coast, for example. This one guy talked about at one point there were 20 guys that came on his block from some other neighborhood. 10 went on one side of the street, 10 went on the other side of the street. This is in broad daylight. And they just went down through people's yards, and if your generator was not chained down, they
just took the generators, right.
And so if you don't have the ability to get out there and defend your property, that means that your family is going to be cold and starving and dead while somebody else is enjoying the profits from what you got. So if you don't have the ability to defend yourself and defend what you have, you can have everything else you need, but if you can't defend it, it don't matter anyway.
What about communication? You know, in an exchange that we had, it was pointed out that the cell phones didn't work because there was no support. There was no power for the cell phones. So there was no means of communication, and the only thing cell phones could be used for was criminals were sending their scouts into communities to take pictures of what they were going to come back and steal.
Right.
But the cell phones weren't good for making phone calls.
Right.
So now you in a situation, you got you prepared yourself food, clothing. You need warm clothing. You need fuel. You need defense, some arms to defend yourself. Okay, so you've got all this kind of stuff, but you can't call up anybody. Nobody can call you up. You can't communicate.
Well, that's a
Smoke
situation
signals.
where shortwave radios and those kind of things come into play.
Okay.
CB radios and shortwave radios, because those are less technology dependent.
Where do you buy CB radios?
A lot of places. Radio Shack.
Okay,
truck
so they're
stop.
there.
Yeah.
That's the interesting thing. There used to be military, what they call Army surplus stores.
Right. Yeah.
I don't see any. Where are they?
They're in the white neighborhoods.
They still have Army surplus.
Absolutely.
So you could actually go there and you could get like portable toilets that you put tablets in that would, that would destroy the waste, so that you wouldn't have to be dependent on a toilet that flushes.
Right.
There were all kinds of things that you could find in Army surplus stores, the kind of stuff that you use for camping. The one thing that I know is good about having scout training is that the kids do go out and actually stay in situations, in the woods and so forth and so on, and they do learn some stuff. They do get they do take some of the sheen off of urban children. And I just kind of wonder about, I know that one of the celebrities has a camp for boys, but it's primarily a camp for modifying their behavior, so they quit acting like thugs when they come back to the community. What about teaching them some skills so that they can be useful, not just come back and behave themselves?
See, the individual training is fine short term for a short emergency.
Right.
And the part that, we're going into another world now. We're moving into a world of long emergencies. Like even Sandy was known weeks before it happened.
And they could do nothing about it.
Well, they prepared the best they could.
Yeah, they did, but then the houses got blown off
right.
off their foundation.
What I would look for in not only an individual but in a community is control, like you said, your food, number one. Water first, food, energy. When a community has no control over their water, their food, and energy, it's not a resilient community.
Well, now you off the grid, right?
Yeah. We're off grid.
So that means that you're not dependent upon power companies to provide you with energy for light
or for generating power.
For generating power.
So we use 3 different sources of energy. That's small solar panels, generators, batteries, and wood. And if we can get some other fossil fuel like propane or something, like some gas, or like he says with the kerosene. That's fine short term. You get through, like we was at the class, the guy was talking about, well, it's enough, you won't need enough, somebody to be there to save you. Well, nobody might not come in 90 days. But where we're going now, we're having these long emergency, these long weather systems that are very disruptive to the infrastructure that we become accustomed to having. Quick energy, cut the switch off. You store right on around the corner. Most of us. Someplace close where we can get food. We've accepted the convenience. We so conveniently killing ourselves, I say. Because of convenience, we don't want to look at what we've been talking about. You think you can go to the store if the power is off. You can go to the store if there was a disruption. We have a 3-day supply of food in the whole system. We have what they call a just-in-time food system. Now that's the most terrifying thing to me.
You mean that if we all decided to go to the store and shop,
it'd be
we
gone
could only
in one
get
day.
Okay.
In an emergency, it'll be gone in one day.
And don't let
That's
some of the
supply based
some of the ill-tended bridges and roads get out of commission.
Right.
Then delivery trucks can't even get in to bring more.
I remember the big snow in '67.
I remember that. I was going to bring that up.
And by halfway through that first day, I remember the milk trucks. They were just stuck right there in the hood and stuff like that. I mean, food trucks couldn't get through.
Right.
Gasoline trucks couldn't get through.
And milk and bread were the first things to go.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. So this
we didn't
system,
believe it was happening. I was coming home
to.
from work, and I think it took me 8 hours. I worked on the west side. I lived on the south side. And I think I started away from my job. And 8 hours later, I was still trying to get home. And it took 8 hours.
In Pembroke, there was a lot of elders that died in that storm. And because they had no way of getting out or no way of people getting in. It's not well known, but it's a lot of elders that died in Pembroke when they had that storm in '68. And Chicago, we had a great time because we didn't have to go to school and all that. But in Atlanta, I was in Atlanta in 92, 93. When they had that snowstorm that they never had no experience, it shut the state down. We had food riots that no one talked about. I was standing in line at Lions and people was finna they were tearing the doors down to get the food. And trucks couldn't get in because nobody carries any inventory. So to me, a readiness for community is having more local control over your basic fundamentals. Your food coming 1,000 miles away is not sustainable in the
Well, what do you do if you live in a food desert, as so many parts of Chicago have been declared food deserts because the distance that you have to go to find any major grocery store
the thing
is
for
so
me,
great.
The food desert conversation is one that was designed for major corporations to come back in and suck more resources out of that community. But if the community really looks at this, you make sure that you're growing as much as you can, as close as you can.
Oh, that's a thought.
Right.
Put some seed in the ground.
Put a seed in the ground, like my dad said.
And grow some stuff.
Grow something. If minimally, you can eat it yourself. You can dry it, dehydrate it, can it. That's a form of food preparation, preserving foods.
Who's teaching that? Who's teaching young people, for example, how to can? I know how to do that.
Right.
Who's teaching them how to can, how to preserve, how to dehydrate?
That's out there. There are people through the Healthy Food Hub. One is named Barbara. She's teaching. There are other people in the Nation of Islam that are teaching. But they're still we're not fully impacting our community or the significance of that, because the association of canning is like I'm going back to the past. Country. You know, my great-granddaddy did that. My father told me, my dad thought, he said, boy, you're doing what we all ran away from. But he said, now I think you're smart. We ran away from it because of the painful association with doing that. That's like a backwards move, and that's how our community is holding it. But those backwards moves, what kept our
I guess I learned to hold that in high esteem because nobody made me do it. And so I was able to come in and just be in the kitchen while the canning was going on and get to do some stuff, you know. And so when I had a chance to do that as a young mother with a large family, when I had a chance to buy a bushel basket of something, you know, and blanch it and put it up and have it in mason jars sitting in my pantry, I was so proud of myself.
You knew what was in there,
because you feel and you have to keep the children because they want to go right in and start sampling it. But the whole point is to know how to do things from the beginning, to know how, which our strong suit is to make a way out of no way. Like you said, if we have the motivation, if we have the goal, we figure out a way to get to the goal. And so, you know, when we couldn't get out, we couldn't go a block down the street in that snowstorm.
Right.
But you know, if you had flour and meal and shortening and stuff, you could cook, you could make all kind of bread. You could cook, you could make stuff, you could make stuff happen. If you had dried beans in the house, you know, you could make stuff happen. You had potatoes in the house. You could 40 ways you could keep bringing potatoes back, you know. So the thing is, this kind of basic thing, this resourcefulness that you need to have at the bottom, you know. Somebody needs to teach you how to be resourceful so that you don't have. We entertained ourselves. We played games at the table. You know, we in games that we had played over an extended period of time. We brought them back and played them. The whole point is that families don't do that. They don't play board games. They watch television. They use their iPads and their iPhones and so forth and so on. And I wonder if we were confined together over a long period of time, if we would even be able to get along with each other.
You've seen this movie called Revolution? I don't know if you've seen it.
I've heard about it. I haven't seen it yet.
So it's a series out called Revolution.
I see that series. I haven't watched it.
What happened in the future, all the power went out on the planet. For some reason, I haven't got to the part where they say why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, we was in a post-carbon world. And there was no trains, there was no planes, there was no cars. People had mules and buggies, and those that had guns was only the militias that was controlling the weapons. Anybody had any weapons. But people had to relearn basic things that they didn't know anymore. You know, guys that all they knew was computers, they had no value function in an environment like that.
Well, you know, the Amish people are to be admired. I once wandered into an Amish community because at that point we were looking for, what's this housing called it's, you know, you can buy it and they come and set it down. Prefab.
Right.
We didn't know that there were all kind of rules and regulations about having that. We thought we were going to buy a prefab home and make it a center. Well, the city of Chicago don't play that. They don't play the kind of pipes that they put in to prefab homes. And there's all kinds of building code violations that if you try to put one up. But where we had to go to see them was in an Amish community. And to see the people going down the street on horses, in buggies. We went in an Amish grocery store. There were no lights in there. It just, the daylight was all that was in there. And I can't remember seeing any refrigeration. You know, it just seemed like the stuff was just sitting on shelves and what have you. But it was a most interesting experience, you know, and the people wearing clothes that they made.
Right.
Interesting. They sew. You know, they go to the store and buy, maybe they even make their own textiles. Who knows? They probably do.
Right.
But the point is that it was almost like going back in time, as you say, go back, because these were such resourceful people, and I thought about that because I've always wanted to be a resourceful person and not somebody who was dependent upon all kinds of artificial ways of meeting needs. I want to be able to do things that require some intelligence, you know, that you just don't walk in there and they just hand it to you and it's all packaged up and you didn't have to give it a thought.
You ever notice the kids there? The children?
Children say in a minute, I'm bored, and they got everything in the world
I was
to
in the
entertain
Amish,
themselves.
in Colorado. I went to one of the auctions they had. I was so impressed with the children in that community. They were so healthy. And there was no technology at all. I think they had a generator for some things, for the speakers. But those children brought up in an environment.
This was in the Amish community?
It was in the Amish community. I've never seen kids so happy. And it's something about that that's also healthy.
Right. They're in a very nurturing kind of environment, and they're in a very supportive environment. I once read about a particular Amish community in Pennsylvania somewhere. And they have a policy that when their youth reach the age of 18, they get them X number of dollars, and say if you want to go out and see the world, see the world. You want to go screw around? You want to go get high? You want to go out there and do all things.
So those wild oats.
If you like it, stay there. If you don't like it, come back. 97%. 97% after seeing the world come back to that community and live that Amish lifestyle and raise their children that lifestyle. Right? That is powerful.
Exactly.
Because not only are you talking about just having all the basic necessities, more so than the basic necessities, what you're talking about is a way of life in regards to how they interact with each other. And that, for too many reasons, is the missing ingredient in our community. It ain't the absence of things. Black people in America are the 14th largest, richest. If black people in America would be the 14th largest nation in the world, if we looked at us as a separate nation, our economy is between, I think, Mexico and Spain or New Zealand, something like that. But in terms of economies of the world, black people in America would make up the 14th largest economy in the world. Right? Last year we made almost $1 trillion. It was like $900 billion plus. All right, so it's not a question of being poor, not having money, but not having the control of our own minds
and not having the values.
Right. In order to take advantage of the resources that we do have to come through our hands.
Right.
Well, those kids eat food that our kids have no frame of reference for having.
Right. Our children are very quick to say what they don't like and what they don't eat, and we allow it.
But because that's as parents we allow it. You know, it's like in my household when I was brought up, whatever my mama cooked for dinner, that's what you ate. You ate that. Your choices were eat what she cooked or go to bed
don't eat.
Wasn't no McDonald's, wasn't no peanut butter sandwich because I don't like greens. You ate, and then halftime she'd be sitting up there with a belt around her neck. And you better eat what you cook. Yeah, absolutely.
My mother thought children who had to eat in restaurants were underprivileged. She thought it was just, and I wanted to go and have a hamburger. My mother said, "Oh, but those children, their mothers can't be at home to cook for them." So we got 1 minute, and I guess the thing that we just want to do is put the conversation on the table and hope that the next time people gather, maybe for the seasonal holidays, that they will have conversations around this. You know, ready or not. To what extent are we ready?
Right.
And for what are we ready?
Right.
You know. So community preparedness ought to be a topic of conversation among people who decide they want to just keep on being, you know. Otherwise, I don't know. We can talk about athletics or some other subject.
Okay.
I'm glad you came, Fred Carter of Black Oak Center, and I'm glad you came, Gimbu. The name of your organization is again?
Outdoor Leadership Skills Project.
Outdoor Leadership Skills Project. They can reach you
at www.blacksurvivalnetwork.com.
www.blacksurvivalnetwork.com and Black Oak Center
at blackoakcenter.org. And also the phone number is 773-410-3446.
Okay.
Yeah, I like another one.
You would go out and talk to people, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
If they called you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very glad you came.
Thank you.